Hello, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiberchats, and today my guest is Steven B from StevenBe store in Minneapolis. Hi, Steven.
Hello.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really love having you on. So I wanted to start with that jacket behind you.
Oh, okay.
And the reason is I've read somewhere that like you like to use all kinds of different materials in your knitting.
Yes, yes.
So what's in
Uh,
that jacket? Tell us about
well,
the jacket.
this is 16 millimeter film. And the reason I do this is because, I mean, classic knitting and garment knitting and shawl knitting has become my business.
Right.
So I needed something to take me away, to offer me fun in that. And Joy, could you get me those plates from that Margaret just bought from the tea set? The pointy things.
Oh, yeah.
And so I try to find things that intrigued me. So this was 16 millimeter film from when I was a kid. I went to summer camp and I didn't like summer camp. It was all boys. You had to bounce the quarter off your bed, make your bed. I got bullied. And so when the camp closed, I got all the film from the camp. And so these are pictures of me playing kick the can and capture the flag and all that stuff that I detested. And now I get to knit it into a sweater.
Right.
And knit it into a sweater, and it becomes something fun, and I can talk about it, and I'm proud of it, and there you go. So then I use really thick cotton rope, and you can see the end of the film there is the red, so that's my pop of color.
Right.
And when I hang things up, I even think of coordinating the hanger to the garment. And the other day I found I bought teas from my mother, and I found these. And so immediately my creative mind went, oh, I could make a sweater with those on it. So I'm gonna call it the Madonna sweater, because she did that outfit for Barbie with the pointy boobs.
Right.
And so I figured I'm gonna put them on the shoulders, I think, of my sweater.
Right. So I mean, to me, this is the essence of you. You take anything that people will never even consider knitting with, and you create it into a knitting items. Like, do you remember the first time you did that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in high school, but I mean, I didn't have accessibility to so much unusual stuff. My mother thought it'd be good to grow up in the country, so we bought an acre of land and built a house, and I was out in the country, and I was really a city kid from day one. So but I'm experimenting with yarns. I remember knitting I-cord, yards and yards and yards of I-cord, and then I knit a sweater with the I-cord.
Okay.
Because I couldn't get thick enough yarn at that time. I got a picture of me wearing it with a big black belt that belonged originally to my Santa costume. That's how big the belt was. But I look at my whole life, I look at things and I go, what could I use this for that it wasn't intended for?
Right.
Everything. I look at everything like that. And that's how I look at a pattern. What could I use for this that it doesn't call for? What could I equate, strands together or totally different fiber? I'm always looking for the least obvious.
Right. So do you remember when you started knitting?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I actually remember it or my mother tells me. And I also have photo documentation in my legendary book. I was 4.5 and I had one of those little kid lawn chairs, and I was sitting outside in our courtyard, or in our little yard, fenced off, white picket fence, and knitting. My mom said probably I was just wrapping the yarn around the needles because I was mimicking her.
Right.
And then by the time I was 8, I was knitting pretty proficiently.
So she was a lifelong knitter herself. She comes from Germany, right?
Right. She escaped from East Germany. And the story is that her parents paid the black market to smuggle her out, and a refugee from East to West. And so she was treated like a refugee, but she had nothing. So she escaped with her shoes around her neck, and her knitting was tucked into her bra because they had to hide during the day.
Right.
So she knits. And so she always says that her knitting is closest to her heart. And that's her, you know, she escaped when she was 17.
Right.
Back in those days, I mean, there was no decent yarn, and you basically knit socks and hats, maybe a sweater. And she said during World War II, they unraveled any knit thing they could and reknit it, you know, constantly. And she tells a story of when she was a girl and there was a parachute factory, because in East Germany, they converted everything to wartime factories, and they made parachutes. And when the spools of yarn were too small to be used on the knitting machine, they'd throw them over the fence so that girls could go and gather them up, and they would hold multiple strands of this parachute silk together and knit with it. And
Do you think that's where you got the first idea of putting,
you know what,
together?
It could totally be. I never put two and two together, but now that you say that, yeah, they made their underwear out of parachute silk.
Right. I want to talk about your mom and her role in your life, because, I mean, it's so rare nowadays that somebody will take the mother who has dementia and bring her to your house instead of nursing home. And I know this is what you did, and you're taking care of her. Why is she so near and dear to you? Like, what is it that she influenced you so much that this is what you're doing?
Yeah, I think with it, as in with any relationship, it's a parental child love, and then we irritate each other both also. So it's, a give and take. But I think her story and the hardships she went through and what she was able to give me meant so much. And I told her when I was a little boy, because I was such a mama's boy, and she gave me knitting. Her yarn shop after school was my place to escape. Right. I didn't get bullied there, and the ladies loved me, this precocious child that knit, and I'd wind their yarn for them. It gave me a purpose and something to look forward to. So she gave me that. And then as I was growing up, when I was 16, I said, Mom, I want to go live in Paris for the summer. So I got, on my 16th birthday, I got tickets to Paris, and I went by myself. We just click. And I did tell her that I would never put her in a nursing home when I was a child. So I'm just living up to the promise. Right. And, some days it's hard, but it's like those moments that come are so meaningful. And plus I inherited her yarn shop. So, I've got all that now. She told me one time, midlife crisis, when I was wondering what to do next, she said, here, she throws me a bag of yarn. She says, open up a yarn shop. I don't have any money, but your inheritance is coming in bags of 10. And I did get it. 4 of the largest U-Haul trucks full of yarn of bags of 10. And we're still sorting it 3 years later. Right.
Well, before you opened the yarn store, you had a corporate job, right?
Yeah, I had a corporate job. I started as a knitwear designer for an upscale company called St. Croix Knits. It's based in Winona, Minnesota. They're high-end men's luxury sweaters. And so I had to learn how to run knitting machines before. They made you learn all that before you could be on the design floor. And then I got started my traveling with them. And my next gig was a golf wear designer for Munsing Wear, the little penguin logo. Yeah. And I had never been on a golf course, so I don't know what they were, signing up for. All I knew is that men look ridiculous in the embroidered pants with, I don't know, cartoons on them or whatever they had, golf clubs on them, and those stupid colors that no one would wear in public otherwise. So I took it and I turned it around. I took everything that was menswear, but put it in golf wear silhouettes. And it brought the company out of Chapter 11. And it's still around today. It got sold as a conglomerate, and I moved to Miami, ultimately became vice president of design, merchandising, and marketing. And that's when I hit that.
What made you stop that, come home, and decide to open the yarn store?
A lot of things. I had a house in Miami, an apartment in New York, a house in Minneapolis, and working out of Hong Kong. And I was just spread too thin. I wasn't healthy. I didn't enjoy it anymore. Wasn't creative. I wanted to be creative. That's why I became a designer. And I was making deals and approving design boards and signing paychecks and, that kind of thing. And it was like, oh, I got what I wanted, 6-figure salary, but it isn't exactly fulfilling.
Right.
anymore. And that's when I left. And I'd done it for 27 years. So it was time for a new chapter. And I'm a big person on new chapters. So
Looking back, right? Have you ever once regretted leaving that corporate job?
no, not at all. In fact, StevenBe has 2 chapters. So now I'm just waiting for the next chapter. I call it my Marilyn Monroe syndrome because it's like the 7-year itch. That movie. It's like every 7 to 8 years, I get this need to change something.
Right.
And that's where I'm at right now. So I don't know what it's going to be. I was thinking I need to move to a great European city and go StevenBe Fiber Studio from USA, or, you know, StevenBe, the American yarn store, because the Europeans love all the American yarns now, the way we knit, whereas it used to be the other way around.
How do you think it's different between the American yarn stores and European yarn stores? Like, what do you think is the main difference?
Well, they started out so classic, you know, they always were. It was functional. You knit socks that lasted, and a sweater that was practical. And, you know, there's European countries like Katia and that in Spain that are a little more progressive. But last time I mean, it was a few years ago now, but I went to a yarn show in Paris, and they were still showing fun fur. So they weren't quite catching up to the trend. The knitters weren't. Maybe the yarn companies were, but the knitters weren't. Right. And today I find that, you know, we really engineered the growth in the market of speckled and hand-dyed yarns. And they didn't have that breadth of selection. And so now, you know, they all love the Madeline Tosh and the Malabrigo and all those companies that are so popular here. Right. And they just, you know, space is expensive in Europe. The yarn shops, I mean, the luxury of me having 7,000 square feet of a yarn store is unheard of anywhere, right? Really. So I think that's part of it too. And then it depends on the store owner. European knitters tend to be more classic, and so their store is more classic. Right. And I don't think you're going to find many of them like me.
Well, I don't think it's like anywhere in the world you can find too many like you.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. Well, let's talk about your store. So on one hand, here you are knitting with like the craziest thing you can get your hands on. On the other hand, you are running the store. You are the owner of the store. So you have to be in control. You have to decide what's going to sell. You have to decide what's the wisest investment in yarn. How do you do that?
I go by, there's a lot of different ways, but I go by my taste level, and everything in here, mostly everything in here is approved by me, and I have a need for it. I think that I'm known for the bright colors, finding new yarn designers, new companies that aren't seen too much. I was one of the first to carry hedgehog in the United States, and then it became huge. So it's the color, it's the uniqueness. And I used to buy everything when I started the first store in 2003. I bought everything I liked, and because I came off my corporate job, so I was well funded, and I could buy what I wanted. So I bought everything I liked in every color. Well, you'll soon find out that not every color in every yarn sells well, and there's always like a couple, 3 that are the best sellers. Right. And so I learned that, and then I followed the trends. And so not just in knitting, I tend to look other places, what's happening with Apple and what's happening in the fashion world, the runway, what's happening in art, what's happening in pop culture. So I always look at those things for inspiration and buying versus what other yarn shops are carrying. Right. So I don't look at them as competitors. I just think like a city like Minneapolis has 16 yarn shops in this city and suburb. And it's a good thing because people come here and we're known kind of as one of the yarn meccas like Portland. Right. So yeah, that's the difference, I think.
How do you decide when you go to the yarn festivals with the store? How do you decide what you're gonna bring?
Well, now it's been a little more planned out, but in the beginning, I just, you know, I brought everything in suitcases. So I bought 30 suitcases, rolly bags. And I just take it in that way. If I have to get it into the facility, I can pretend it's my luggage and I don't have to pay for union help. But to get it in. And so I just throw all my favorites in. And when the suitcases were full, that's how much I was taking. In later years with a larger staff, I was able to plan it better. And again, it's all things that you won't find at other yarn shops. It's all colors that I've had done custom. Importing things, like I import directly from South Africa, and all my mohairs, because South Africa produces most of the world's mohair. All my mohair comes from there, and I work with job creation programs in South Africa, like Adele's, and in the past, Be Sweet. And I work with the Mohair South Africa, which is a nonprofit that promotes mohair around the world. So I work for them also.
Right.
And so that's the stuff I bring. And that's what people come to my booth for, the unusual and the color. And my booths are always fun. We have a theme, like the last season, it was flamingo. So everything was, we had flamingo sequin curtains and flamingos all over the booth, and yarns dyed to flamingo. And before that, it was zebra, and it was always some theme. Peacock, I've done peacock a lot. And I forgot what my new one was going to be. I thought of it the other day. Anyway, there's always a theme, and it makes it fun, and the lighting is bright. And we learned from the first yarn shows that you need to bring your own lighting, because what's at the hotels isn't sufficient. So my light, in fact, there was a booth for me. It was a lace knitting group from a city. And they complained that my lights were too bright. It was hurting their eyes. So they had to wear those black overlay glasses.
Right.
You're successful when you're so bright that it hurts someone's eyes.
What happens to all the stuff that you need? Do you sell that? Do you collect that?
It's a challenge. Ironically, since you and I talked last, a gentleman was in from Manitoba and bought like 50 samples because he wants to take them back for his family. But it's hard to sell samples because knitters want to make it themselves. I, on the other hand, who knit, I just buy anything knit that I like because I won't have time to make it all.
Right.
But knitters, and then the people that want to buy it don't realize how much it's worth. By the time, most of the samples that go out of here are gifts or a donation. I'd rather do it in that purpose than to get $15 for something,
Right.
But I still hold on to the best ones. I've got like 1,000 in my lower level vaults. So don't tell anybody.
Do people ever give you gifts?
Yes. So I love hand knit gifts. By the way, any of you out there, my birthday is Christmas Eve, December 24th. And then the next day is also a giving day, Christmas Day. So take any knits that seemed like they'd work for me. And that's what I have on here. The owner of Malabrigo gifted me this last week. There was a yarn show in Charlotte, North Carolina, I think it was. And they showed there, I wasn't able to go. So the owner of Malabrigo sent this back for me as a gift. It's two strands of Rasta held together on a size 35 needle. He kind of knows I'm the only one that would use that big of a needle. This is one of the gifts I got. This is my Pancini design from a lady that took my workshop, one of the first ones, with myself and Steven West in Sarasota, Florida, at a Good Yarn. And she didn't really want to go. She liked making socks. She was very classic and traditional, like gray and natural brown, woolly socks, kind of scratchy. She came to my class, and this is what she knit next. So, and she's one of the most extreme stories, and I love her to death. Paula, she said that class changed her life, and I always exaggerate the story a bit, but it was like she went home and she had to close her yarn shop, and she got divorced, and she moved to another city. She moved to Wyoming, and all these things happened after she took our class. So careful of how much we change your life. But anyway, so there's like this yellow is fencing string from the hardware store where you line up things straight with it. And then this is shoelaces from the shoes, jelly shoes.
Yep.
So it's like that rubbery stuff, blue. And then these are, they got glass tubes in the middle, pom-poms from the crafting store. And I wear it all the time. She gifted it to me after the class. And so, it's something I love. Right. And then, sometimes I get stuff like this, Scary Cat.
That's so
Isn't that
adorable.
a song from Friends? Scary cat, smelly cat?
Smelly cat.
Smelly cat. Well, she doesn't smell, but she's kind of scary. So
She's
it sits in the
adorable.
lobby and it intrigues everyone. And this is what you do with your fun fur. But I mean, look at the tail. It looks like the
Right.
other cats got to it.
Well, I want to ask you about Pancini. So we got introduced by Suzanne Bryan, and my conversation. So she was interviewing me actually, as well as you. So we got into this conversation of cooking versus baking, and I told her that I like cooking because it's like throw a pinch of this and a pinch of that, versus baking where it's like precision, like you have to follow the exact recipe. And she was like sort of surprised, and I said, when it comes to knitting, I'm probably more of a baker, but like because I follow the other people's patterns, right? You definitely a cook when it comes to knitting.
Yeah, and that's my favorite story I talk about all the time. I compare it to cooking, and if you were making pasta sauce for your family and you just open up a tomato paste and put it on the table with some pasta, your family's going to go, "You didn't finish, Mom." But if you saute onions and garlic and some olive oil and put Italian sausage and Romano tomatoes, you're going to have a pasta sauce. And that's how I collect my fibers, and I combine them in that same idea. And it makes for a more flavorful project. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but usually everyone that takes my workshop says, "Oh my gosh, you opened up the box for me." Or somehow I didn't know I needed permission to jump outside the box, but you gave it to me.
Right.
And so that's what I did with the Pancini. I was traveling with Stephen West and he was making all these shawls. And I'm like, I don't need to make shawls. You've got that covered. So I made the Pancini, and there's a lot of different varieties. It's a long strip that's sewn side to end. And I've got a book out, Pancini. This is the drop it like it's hot, because it's a drop stitch pattern. And then this is my newest one. It's called the Dramacini because of the sequins, and it's done with my lazy short rows. My friend Barban Pappas created this and wrote the pattern up for me.
So let's talk about your lazy short rows. So you came to Suzanne Bryan's show, and you taught how to your way of doing German short rows. Was that unnerving, like to go on her show where she's like, this is what she's known, she's a certified handmaster knitter from the Knitting Guild Association, right? And there you come to her show and you teach your way. Like, is that something you think is like
taboo?
Yeah.
Well, see, I don't look at it like that. I don't see competition. And besides, I know that I'm not that serious of a knitter, that I'm not precision, and she is. And so I really respect that.
Right.
And I think there's always like 10 ways to, that whatever that saying is, 10 ways to do something. And I've just got another way. So, and I don't have to be right. I just like to be inspirational. And Suzanne's way of teaching is more exacting and precision and fact-based. And mine is more theory and emotion and feelings. And so when I do that, it's just because I'm a lazy knitter and I want to find all the shortcuts I can to get through the rows.
Right.
And that's what I was presenting. So no, it didn't intimidate me because I was just presenting another idea, and she respected me, and I totally love her. So, it was a mutual appreciation fest.
Okay, I want to ask you another thing in a similar sort of question, right? So you're doing the workshop where you're gonna do the Weekender
the
letter
Weekender
by Andrea Maury, right? Like, that's not your way to follow the pattern, to teach other people how to follow the pattern. What's your idea behind that workshop?
Well, maybe, I don't know so much on this one, but because I come in with my tips and tricks, different ways of edging and different ways of starting and different ways of finishing, trying to do more of it at one time than in all the individual elements. And I just put personality on it, because it's one thing just to sit there and read your pattern and try to garner what Andrea had in mind, but it's another to to do it with someone that's a cheerleader and a you rah rah inspirationalist. It's like going to church, kind of, you know?
Right.
You already know what your religion is, but if you go to church, you get a little more involved and excited. And that's kind of, it's going to be more of a knit along with tips and tricks than anything. And I have, you know, every class I'll be teaching something. I got to show you one thing though.
Sure.
This is people that take the weekender with me. This is like one of them. This is what they ordered to make it with. So not exactly what Andrea Mowry had in mind.
Right.
You know, so that's why.
When we talked last time, you called Andrea Mowry and Steven Weston like guys like them, like the super popular designers,
The pop stars of
the
Ravelry.
pop stars, but you called them the gatekeepers. Do you feel like, I mean, I have like a lot of friends who are young, inspiring, they're like just aspiring designers, right? They're just starting, they're trying to get into the industry, and they find it like very difficult because there's Andrea and there is Steven West who like make it seem so easy, make it seem so effortless, make it seem so like inspiration strikes every second and it's always successful, it's always like very precise, the photography is brilliant. Do you find it like that it's did it turn sort of prohibitive for other designers? Do you do something in your store to promote like less known designers?
I love doing less known designers, but again, it's got to be quality and it's got to be something the public wants. And I feel that, I know the first shawl that Steven West did and where it was at. It was brown and it was an increase down the center, triangular shawl, and it called it the Boneyard. So everybody starts somewhere.
Right.
And Steven, I still stick by this. Steven West used brown and beige and natural colors and wore plaid shirts before I met him. You could see that in his first books. And then we plugged in the neon and he took off from there. But Andrea Mowry's got, she gets what people want to make, and she can show a project that isn't all that hard, that looks like amazing.
Right.
I really love them and the things they do. Again, for me, my pattern writing, I kind of got stuck and I wanted to do things that were never done before, but that's not necessarily going to get you success. It's like when I was a designer, it was never good to be the first one out on the market with an idea. Because it took testing and it took a failure or it took a challenge. And then 2 years later, someone would come out with the same thing and I go, hello, I did that already. And they're successful with it. And that's kind of like me. And I've always knit with mohair and a strand together ever since I was a kid.
Right.
And now it's popular and it's credited to whoever, you know, wrote the pattern, which is great. And like brioche, I did brioche as a kid, but we didn't call it brioche and it wasn't that hard. And now all of a sudden it's the trend stitch, you know,
Right.
and I'm like, well, okay. So, you know, it's never great to be first. It's more successful to come later on with some great ideas. And the other thing is I always faded and did color gradation. I never did anything in one color. So I have this sweater that I started in charcoal, from black to charcoal to gray to pink. And I still haven't finished it. It's from like 1976. But I've kept it all these years because it was my color gradation theory.
Right.
And I love that because I can use multiple strands and change one strand at a time and I like to make my own yarns rather than buy something off the shelf and use it as it is. I don't know if that was, I don't figure those yarns were intended for just that. I figure they're maybe an ingredient in that recipe we're going to follow, and they can become part of a greater whole. And
how do you see like the whole industry changed, like from 70s to now? Like, what do you see that's different now that before Ravelry happened, let's say?
Well, I love always to give my little brief history because, you know, knitting originally in the old, 1600s, 1700s was a men's job.
Right.
They worked as cappers or stockingers, making caps and socks. And then in Victorian times, it became a women's hobby for the wealthy pastime. 50s and 60s, I remember Marie Gray, who's a very successful designer in California. said she was a model first, and the models would sit there and they knit their own suits to wear to modeling sessions in Los Angeles. And can you imagine starting a beginner on a wool suit nowadays? And nobody would ever finish. Or Argyle socks, your first project. And then along come the 70s and crochet took off. And we're seeing that same renaissance again. So history repeats itself every so many years. But in the 70s, I did mostly crochet. I knit some sweaters, crocheted lots of toy animals. I crocheted my bedroom carpeting completely, wall to wall. And then macrame came. And then in the 80s, knitting came back. You know, the crochet dropped off a bit. But then there was a lull, I think, in merchandise. There wasn't any really good USA merchandise. It was like acrylic, Lion Brand, wool and acrylic, basic yarns. And the Europeans had the novelty stuff. And it was very expensive. I remember when my mom got a skinny yarn in the shop, was $8, because our highest one was $5. It was $8. We thought we'd never sell it at $8. Like, it was just outrageous.
Right.
And now, you know, I get $80 for a skinny yarn. So the whole, and then the knitting thing kind of lulled in the 90s and came back. And I feel there's two types of knitting. One is a classic knitter, and they go for a well-finished project. The other one is a crafty knitter. So they went for the fun fur scarves, the felted bags, and then a few years ago, the ruffle scarves. So every time knitting takes on a crafting element, then they come into the scene. Otherwise, they're doing stamping and bookmaking and all those kind of other crafts that you see out there. So now we're really in a hardcore knitter cycle. And once Ravelry came along, the world is your oyster. You can find a pattern for anything. And how did we communicate that before? In my mom's yarn shop, you came in and you bought a knitting book, and you wanted to make sure like it had 3 good things in it so they could get your value out of it. And somebody bought that book and then bought the yarn for one, and then came back but bought the same yarn for something else, and then came back and bought the same yarn for the third item. Nowadays, it's like the clothing business. You have to, what's new, hot, what, we get boxes every day. It's like Christmas here. You've got to be on the top of the trend, and the knitter doesn't necessarily want to use the same yarn over and over again. They want to use something new and try and experiment. And that way it's become a bit more artistic. There's not as run of the mill. And honestly, let's be serious. None of us really need another knit item. You know, we do it for the journey most of the time, not necessarily a destination unknown. I remember one time I was dressed up as a kid, and I had knit snow pants on, a knit sweater, and then another knit sweater over that, and a scarf and a knit hat and leg warmers and mittens. And I'm like, Mom, could we just go to the store and buy something, please? You know, so that was practical knitting, and yarn was like 25 cents at Woolworths. You know, now we knit for enjoyment and pleasure, and I only knit things that I could never buy in a store.
Right.
And it's just my way of thinking. If I want a red cabled sweater, I'm going to go buy one. Because you can look up red cabled sweater on Google and come up with 20,000 different options.
Right. When people come to your store, do you feel like it's easier for you to sell something if like somebody will need a sample of the yarn so people can see what they can make it? Like, do you feel like people are visual, or do they go for that indie dyed yarn, and like, do they have the imagination of what they can do with it?
Well, I don't know. There's 3 different types of shoppers, I think. In my store, I have the people that come in that are fans, and they're super fans, and they want a picture, and they're going to be experimental, and they're going to look for my direction and what putting something together. And then we got the person that comes in with the pattern, and they want what it says, and they want it to look like the picture. And I just off the side, I whisper, then you should just go buy it at the store, because it'll look just like the picture. No, but I understand that. It's just not for me. And, you know, we have samples, you know, the racks. Those are all just Madeline Tosh yarn samples.
Right.
And we have the mannequins. That's a Stephen West pattern on the black one.
Yep.
There's my Pancini from the fashion show. And so we have 1,000 samples at least. And you can see behind me. And I'm a bit more discerning now. I used to make up samples for everything, but I only make up samples now for things that really need it to convey the uniqueness of the project. If you really can't see it by just looking at the skein of yarn. If you want to come in and buy 3 skeins of typewriter hedgehog, I'm not going to make a sample out of it because you can see in the picture in the yarn, it's going to be exactly what you got bought.
Right.
So I obviously had to become more frugal. 1,000 samples is a lot of money.
Right. How did COVID affect your business?
Well, of course, like everyone, we were scared at first and panicked and closed down. But it made us rise to the challenge, which is kind of one of my life philosophies. It's like, how do you know what's that saying? Make lemonade out of lemons. Joy, who's here with me today. Hi, Joy.
Hi, Joy.
She came in. She brought the kitty. There she is. She was here with me, and we were one of the 3 that, maybe 4 at certain times, but the 3 that held it together. And we just ramped up our online business, and we rose to the challenge, and we made our emails really interesting. And we send them out every day, but we do a lot of research, and we bring in new projects and colors and yarns. And people say they love getting them every day. It's the bright spot of their morning. And I don't expect people to buy every time, but it's like every once in a while, something's going to pique your interest. And you're like, oh my God, I love the way they did that. And so we did that, and we were in here sending out mail out every day. And then I figured by January, kind of everybody had ordered online, from February till the following January. And they turned around their knitting chair and goes, oh my gosh, what did I do? I bought so much. So it's leveled off then. And then summer's warm here. And now we've had to figure out a balance with people back in the store, and the online and the in-store kind of equalizing it a bit more, less online and more in-store. It kind of evens out. Right. And I don't know, I just had to, I had to learn Zoom. I never thought I'd have to learn another computer program. And the first one I did for Vogue, it wasn't very good because I didn't know what I was doing with Zoom and which buttons and how to share a screen and participants and all that. And now I've got it down. I do okay at it. I do pretty well some days. I never would have learned that. And it's brought people together. I did a workshop for a family, and they were in all parts of the country, and one lady was here, so she was in store, and we got to bring their family together for a workshop. Right. So all good points of COVID.
How do you decide who to hire for your store?
How do I decide? Well, I think right now my statement is I'll interview anybody that's interested, because it's so hard to get employees right now. Right. But of course, I love the idea that someone knits or crochets. Almost a given. But I guess part of it's I'm hard to work for. So if you can work for me, then you might be hired. Someone that's got a great work ethic. I really require common sense and be able to multitask. Those are my huge issues. My issue, I don't know. I like to be able to, criteria. We have a lot of hours available here. So, and it's weekends, it's retail. So we got to work weekends. But anyway, I'd love someone that's among the people that come in for diversity, and we have all kinds of knitting group. We got the men's knitting group, the trans crafting group, the roller derby girls, the ladies caffeinated lunch ladies. So it's really a diverse crowd, and that's StevenBe, where you can come and be whoever you are, and your yarn can become whatever it wants to be. And I really use a lot of play on that word, like here we've got the legendary, and isn't that great? Be inspired over there. Word B, because it's really important to me. And it's the first 2 letters of my last name, which is how I got it, because someone sent me a flower arrangement and the florist couldn't fit the whole name on the card. So he wrote StevenBe and forgot the RG. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I'm going to use that for my store name.
So when people come, is that your favorite part of the store, to come in and see all the groups and see people socializing, and it's becoming basically like the place, like home away from home for them.
Right. Well, and that's what the yarn shop was for me. Well, it was my safe place. I guess that's what I wanted to be. A comfortable place. You know, you're always welcome. There's always a chair for you. It's kind of like that TV show Cheers. So, you know,
Right.
everybody knows your name. I may not know your name, but I know your project. Okay. And everyone's welcome. And I know in the past, some yarn shops weren't that engaging and encompassing. They weren't that open to diversity. Even in some yarn shops still, I hear crocheters aren't that welcome. So we've really made a point of being the other yarn shop, you know, doing things the other way. And I love having that. And our customer service, it's like my standard is that you treat people how you want to be treated. So if there's an issue that comes up and it's like, if this was happening to you in a store, how would you want to be treated?
Right.
And, you know, there's compromises every which way. Like we have a no needle return policy, but obviously if someone just bought it and went home and go, oh my God, I forgot, I already had one. Then I take it back because why do I want to create animosity over a knitting needle? There's too big of problems in the world other than that. And that's kind of the theory of our store.
Do you feel like when people walk into your store, because just by the sheer size of that store, do you feel like it's overwhelming, or did you work like really hard at organizing it in the way that it's like self-guiding sort of? Like if person comes in, do they get lost, or it's like very easy to navigate?
It's overwhelming for a lot of people just because of the selection. And I think that we have the customer that likes that. You know, it's a hunt and search mission. Right. Everything is very organized. It's by weights and or brand. Like if it's a complete brand and we have a lot of it, it'll be under that branding. Like you see the Malabrigo sign behind me.
Right.
And then next to it is the Blue Sky. So they have their own department. So it's like I don't know if you've been to La Galeries Lafayette in Paris.
Yeah.
That's how their store is set up, by the brand. So that's where I got that idea, you know, partitioned off. And then afterwards, the store goes into worsted, decay, sports, figuring, bulky, chunky, bulky, whatever order. And then we give them a short guided tour, but if we gave them a complete tour, they'd be so overwhelmed, they'd shut down. So we give them a teaser and then they wander. And then there's staff always to work with every customer. So it's a one-on-one. And we're not the kind of store that sits at the counter and keeps knitting while the shopper is shopping. We show them samples. We tell them what they might need to make it and all the extras. Do you need knitting needles, a soak? Do you need closures for it? That kind of thing. And it's just a very pampering kind of environment here.
How involved are you in everyday operation, like you personally?
Well, lately, I've been here 6 days a week, but I had this grand plan about 3-4 years ago. I was going to slowly phase out, you know, and be the guest appearance. And that didn't work out. So I wanted to come in and just go, oh, Steven's here. And, you know, people would come in their groups and I'd be here and we'd knit or whatever. But there's a lot of work that goes beyond behind the scenes. And we're kind of that business that's too big to be a small business, but not big enough to be a big business. Right. So there's a lot of background work, especially with the internet. And it's not like people just click an order and we ship. It's follow up, and then they change a color, and we need one more skein. And it's a lot of work that goes into it. And we want to make every customer happy as well. So it's not like, I don't know, the shorts that you ordered from China where you don't even know where they came from. You know, we're very hands-on, and we call customers. We send them all a thank you note, follow up on their order. And so, and it's a personal, it's not an automatic right. Thank you. It's handwritten specifically for that person. And yeah, so it's a lot more work. What was my question again?
How involved you are.
Yeah, how involved. I'm here I make all the kits up, and I prove most everything. And we have a new website email person, Matt. And so he's running everything by me. People here know that they've kind of got to have my opinion on it, or I might get snarky.
So what's the plans for the store? What's the plans for you, like for the end of this year, for the next year? What's your dream about the store? Where, like, your vision?
Well, I guess right now we're focusing on real good relationships with key vendors. And I'm only going to do business with vendors where, like, I know the owner and that they care that I'm a customer. For companies that don't care and don't get back to me and don't offer the same customer services as we offer, I don't want to deal with anymore. I learned that I can weed some out during COVID. I realized who I didn't need. And then of course, continually bringing on new vendors. And now with a lot of people leaving the job market and the job they had before COVID, you're going to find a lot of new creative people out there expressing themselves through fiber, knitting bags, pins, stitch marker. There's going to be a whole new breadth of merchandise available, and I want to see all of that. And I've already started collecting for the holiday season and beyond. And then the other thing I've been doing is StevenBe pop-up shops. So I will work in conjunction with a yarn shop or a venue or a knitters guild and show up at their place with my pop-up shop, maybe teach a workshop or two, and offer them the StevenBe experience on the road,
Right.
like Charles Perrault on the road. And so far I've done Rapid City, South Dakota, and Ludington, Michigan. It was great because I drove to Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, or Manitowoc, Wisconsin, took the ferry across to Ludington, Michigan. And I got to take the big ferry and put all my yarn on it and showed up there. And I work in conjunction with the shop. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's 2 or 3 days of just high energy and a lot of StevenBeism.
Right. Is there ever a day when you don't knit or don't create something?
Yeah, I find that, that's what I was telling you the other day. It's like, if you really love knitting and you're knitting for yourself and enjoyment, maybe don't open a yarn shop because it's all consuming, a small business is. And so sometimes at the end of the day, it's like I'll sit and do a couple of rows and I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I've seen yarn all day and been answering knit questions and helping people with their projects and making kits. And so I don't think you get enough time to knit or want to knit when you own the knitting business. In contrast to someone that I know, Steven West very well, and he knits 8 hours a day. I go hang out with him in Amsterdam, and everywhere we go, he's knitting. I'm like, could we do something else? But that's why he's so prolific and he's so talented, and God bless him, because I couldn't knit 8 hours a day. I love creating more than I love the actual stitching. Right. So a lot of my projects are fast and fun and keep me entertained. I need to be entertained while I'm knitting.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, I've heard that you said that your ideal project is something that you can do over the weekend, basically.
Yeah.
Is that
it's figuratively, but yeah. I'll show you this. Of course, it's like this, in my size 50 needles. Right. But then you've got this in case community service, Steven. It's knit with caution tape.
I love that.
Time seam tape. So it's a vest so far. I don't know if I'll get sleeves in it or not ever. This is the Pancini Grande. So I took the Pancini and I put it on size 19 needles. And it's 3 skeins of Freya self-stripe. Freya self-striping bulky is the only one that stripes like this. And I put, of course, mohair metallic with it.
Right.
And you can literally make this over the weekend. You get the first hour, you're up here already. And I just like my projects that you can see the progress quickly. Knit it in a minute. It's one of my workshops.
How many workshops do you teach? Like, how many different kinds of classes do you teach?
I think I've got a repertoire about 7 or 8, which I customize to everyone's needs. But the artful short rows or the lazy short rows has been popular. It seems when I teach one of my kind of clever techniques, those are more popular. I do some color workshops. My color one is pretty interesting. I kind of analyze your personality, like if you're really uptight or you're freewheeling, or and then what colors you choose and maybe what other colors you should choose instead or add in. And it really broadens people's horizons because they're like, oh, I never thought of that. Because you may like, oh, look at Joy's got a yellow sweater on. You may like yellow, but you'd maybe never buy like this yellow behind me here, or you'd never buy enough yellow to make a sweater. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about yellow as an additive. You know, a little color inspiration, and, you know, pops of color like I wear on my shirt.
Right.
So stop thinking of as, oh, I'd never buy orange. Well, I don't mean for the whole sweater, you know, and that's how we think. My niece is like, I don't wear orange. I look like a pumpkin. But yeah, or highlight colors. Because really when you use like your own colors, like peacock, turquoises and blues and purples, if you use yellow and orange with them, it pops the peacock colors out.
Right.
And makes it more individual. And that's what I talk about in my color workshop. Yeah, there's about 8 different workshops. Looking to expand.
Like appreciate, because I feel like people like you give the permission other people to like be a little bit braver in what they do with yarn, because like just seeing things you do, it gives like this little push to like experiment with.
Well, you even wore sequins today, so there.
Well, you said make your day sparkle, so I
make your day sparkle. I get so many people that respond back to that. It's like, thanks, you did. You made my day sparkle. Yeah, it's got to be fun. It's got to be furious. It's got to be fast. It's got to be teaching. I don't think you would teach someone art, but you can allow them to discover the inner fiber artist within. Right. And sometimes we don't tap into that because we feel got to follow the pattern, use the same needles and the same yarn. And I'm like, a pattern is only a guideline. So every designer starts somewhere, and they're just doing, if you change it up, you're doing what they did, and you're just taking it one step further. I'm applying for StevenBe to become a transitive verb, StevenBe, meaning to take something further than it was intended to go. That's the definition. So I'm working on that, the Urban Dictionary.
Well, I loved meeting you. I love chatting with you, and thank you so much for.
We could talk all day, right?
We could, you know. Well, one day I'm totally planning to come to Minneapolis.
Oh, I can't wait till you visit. Roll out the red carpet. I got a real red carpet from Hollywood, so.
Right. I can't.
I'm so glad you contacted me, and I wish you all the success with your podcast.
Thank you so much.